This week on Crossroads Politics, battle lines are being drawn over boundary lines.
This redistricting seems like a real way to, silence what people want.
The push from the White House to redraw congressional districts and pick up more Republican seats in Congress, and why they may be looking to Indiana for help. Why Indiana? Our analyst weighs in.
This would be unprecedented.
Plus, controversy over the so-called Speedway Slammer. Indiana partnering with the feds to house illegal immigrants in the state prison. And the IndyCar League says, keep us out of it. While Indiana's lieutenant governor wants a faster crackdown.
They don't have a right to see a judge.
Right.
They came here illegally.
Hello and welcome to this week's Crossroads Politics here on WTHR+. I'm Dustin Grove. What a week it has been. The Vice President's visit to Indiana is where we start. This is part of a conversation going on in several states right now about redrawing congressional district lines to pick up more Republican seats in Congress, something the White House has been pushing for. There was a crowd gathered to meet the Vice President, but many were not happy to see him. Take a look. Hundreds of protesters were there waiting. Vance left the State House after a morning meeting with top Republican lawmakers and Governor Braun. Important to point out here, the governor would have to call a special session to do this. We spoke with Kevin Galley, who moved here in 2018 from Wisconsin. He's a retired attorney and a registered Democrat who says it was really important for his voice to be heard.
Democracy doesn't entitle an occupant of the Oval Office to anything. He's got to work through the constitutional process. He's got to abide the rule of law, just like every one of us.
Galley says to him, it really comes down to protecting democracy. Meanwhile, Republican elected leaders, they were quieter on the subject. Our Emily Longnecker was in the State House trying to find out exactly what happened, keeping your ear to the ground. So what'd you learn?
Well, Republican leaders didn't have a lot to say to provide a lot of specifics, but Governor Braun said he and the Vice President discussed an array of topics and redistricting came up. Earlier this week, the governor said he hadn't made any commitments around the topic. Meantime, Democrats in the state say they're committed to fighting back against any plans to change the state's congressional maps.
Right now, those maps consist of 9 congressional seats, 2 held by Democrats, 7 by Republicans. Those 2 Democratic seats, the 1st congressional district held by Representative Frank Mervan, the 7th congressional district, that's Congressman Andre Carson's seat. Both were at a rally today at the Indiana State House with state Democratic lawmakers. The Vice President's visit comes a day after the 60th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act, a milestone Congressman Carson pointed out, saying the Vice President may have missed the irony of his visit a day later. A visit, Carson said, that was part of trying to disenfranchise voters by silencing their voices at the polls come the midterms in 2026.
A democracy belongs to the people. And the people are making their voices heard. We will not accept our state being cut and spliced and maneuvered for a wannabe king in Donald Trump. We won't accept our democracy to turn into a dictatorship.
And as you mentioned earlier, a lot of voters were at the State House protesting.
And as you mentioned, it wasn't just the governor who was meeting with Vice President Vance. It was also the 2 top lawmakers,
Right.
and the House Speaker Todd Houston
Yes.
and Senate President Pro Tem Rod Bray. That's important because legislators, state legislators, are the ones who would take up redistricting.
That's right. That would be their job. If the governor calls the special session, they would take up the redistricting question. Republican House Speaker Todd Houston shared a statement with 13 News saying in part, "I appreciate the opportunity to meet with Vice President Vance today and share many of the successes we're experiencing in Indiana. We had a meaningful discussion, heard the Vice President's perspective on a number of topics, and will continue conversations as we work to advance Indiana and deliver results for Hoosiers." But yes, very few state Republicans had much to say about redistricting or reacting to the Vice President's visit.
But you did have a chance to ask Governor Braun about it, right?
Right. I asked Governor Braun about it at the State Fair on Friday. Here's what he had to say.
Okay.
Listen, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you another new topic that's kind of come up recently. The vice president was in town.
Yep.
You said you talked about redistricting. What are your plans or thoughts on redistricting here in Indiana?
So he wanted to discuss that with me, the Speaker of the House, and the President of the Senate, pro tem, and we had a good conversation. So you can see that's happening around the country. The discussion's been out there up front and on a large scale in Texas. So I think for us, we want to make sure it makes sense and our legislature is bought into it. So,
I mean, earlier this week you said you'd made no commitments around it. Has that changed?
We really didn't, because we think it's important to get out there and discuss it with the legislators, and that's what the Speaker and the President of the Senate's going to do, and we'll do that over the next few weeks.
So
and they're okay with that because they want to make sure that if there are questions, they can answer them, and that it's going to get broad-based support.
So you're saying at this point nothing is set in stone?
Not at this point.
So, former Governor Mitch Daniels, I don't know, he wrote an op-ed in Politico. I don't know if you saw it.
I heard what he said, and I think generally the thing I pointed out since the other side of the aisle is making a big issue of it, they have gerrymandered their states so much that they can't do it anymore, and that's why they're upset. Yes, this is not in the normal context of doing it right after a census, but then it does put you behind when they've done it, so it's a little hypocritical to come out like that. So Mitch's point, I think, is that he thinks, well, you do that, it'll just be a pushback where you're not really gaining any ground. That'd be different, and I disagree with him, because I think the other side of the aisle has done it in a more calculated way over time.
But not just Democrats. I mean, we've talked to some voters who are concerned that their voices could be silenced at the ballot box if this redistricting happens.
And then it could make more districts competitive to where they've got a chance to maybe be competitive in them. So there are pros and cons to everything. I'm going to be mostly interested to see if there's broad-based support among our own legislature, and then go from there.
Why is this topic even coming up, though? I mean, we've got a lot of things that Hoosiers are concerned about, the economy, Medicaid.
That doesn't mean not all those aren't getting attended to as well. This is on the political side of the ledger. That comes up both sides of the aisle off and on, and this just happens to be the one we're dealing with now.
Even though the Constitution says, what, every 10 years, though, after the census, so I think people...
But it doesn't say you can only do that, and if the other side has done it in a way that's been more intensive, that is what is probably motivating, especially in Texas, which is the biggest conservative state, to take a look at it.
I guess some people, though, have been saying to us, why now? We already have 7 Republican congressional seats. You want another one?
Those are all valid pros and cons to it. We'll see what happens.
All right, so here to talk more about it is Laura Merrifield Wilson from IU Indy, our political analyst here on 13 News. Thanks for being with us.
My pleasure.
So why Indiana? Of all the states, I mean, we're pretty solidly Republican, only 2 Democratic congressional districts, which would seem pretty hard to flip, right?
It would, and I think there's one that's going to be harder than the other, and that's talking about Andre Carson's 7th congressional district versus Frank Mervan's 1st.
Okay.
But to the point of why Indiana, you have a very amenable governor. Mike Braun has fashioned himself after Donald Trump. I think he's sees himself as friends with Donald Trump, so he would want to help the president. In addition to that, even though there's 435 seats in the House of Representatives, and they're up every 2 years, we really expect only 18 of those to be competitive. So we're talking about really slim margins. Every seat counts. And if you're looking at Indiana's 1st congressional district, if that's one that they can flip, they've already identified 5 potential congressional districts in California, right? Mm-hmm. Every district matters, and they may in fact target Indiana because they have a very welcoming state, but also the possibility in that 1st.
Let's talk about, for those who may not be familiar, who draws the lines? It's the state legislature, right?
Yes. Yeah, the state legislature draws the lines both for themselves and for Congress, and they do that every 10 years after a census, understanding that the population both grows and shifts. And part of the idea of apportionment is that all those districts should be more or less the same size.
Okay, so that's done every 10 years.
Yes.
If that's going to happen in between those 10 years, there would have to be a special session.
There would, and governors call special sessions, but our state legislature would have to agree to redrawing the district lines because that is their constitutional responsibility. I would emphasize the term constitutional. There'll be a lot of challenges, a lot of questions. We redraw the lines every 10 years because we know population will shift and we get that information from the census. Nothing else has happened since 2020 or before 2020 or 2030 except the political motivations here. So I imagine there'd be a lot of constitutional challenges if our state legislature decided to try to review the lines and potentially redraw them.
Have we seen this before here?
No, this would be unprecedented, and in part because we recognize it takes a lot to redraw district lines, and the idea of the legitimacy is it's because of census data. There's no reason to believe anything else has changed that we would need to redraw the district lines to address.
All right. Laura Merrifield Wilson, as always, thanks so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And coming up, the Speedway Slammer.
Alligator Alcatraz was the first model, and the Big Beautiful Bill provided us the resources that we need to get these beds online so we can continue to do our work.
How the racing capital of the world feels about that nickname. That's still ahead on Crossroads. Welcome back. A partnership with the federal government is putting Indiana at the center of President Trump's illegal immigration crackdown. The feds are dubbing an Indiana prison the Speedway Slammer, and it could hold ICE detainees. But as our Ashton Hackman explains, how that announcement was made is now getting some pushback from the very place synonymous with the Hoosier State.
It's the racing capital of the world and home to an Indiana tradition. But now Speedway, the center of racing in Indiana, finds itself center of the nationwide illegal immigration crackdown. U.S. Department of Homeland Security announcing Indiana will provide ICE with 1,000 beds at the Miami Correctional Facility to hold illegal immigrants. The prison is dubbed by DHS as the Speedway Slammer.
Alligator Alcatraz was the first model, and the Big Beautiful Bill provided us the resources that we need to get these beds online so we can continue to do our work.
A post on X from the agency is adding to the mixed reaction. It shows an open-wheel race car driving on a track in front of a prison. IndyCar pushed back against the image being used, saying in a statement, quote, "We were unaware of plans to incorporate our imagery as part of yesterday's announcement. Consistent with our approach to public policy and political issues, we are communicating our preference that our IP not be utilized moving forward in relation to this matter." The town of Speedway is roughly 70 miles southwest of the so-called Speedway Slammer, but city leaders find themselves reacting, saying, quote, "This designation was developed and released independently by the federal agency without the town's involvement or prior notice regarding the use of the name Speedway. Our primary focus remains the well-being of our residents, businesses, and visitors."
The current administration absolutely loves to tap into popular imagery and things that are going to have a splash on social media. This is why they're using social media in the way they do, and they do it quite effectively.
The Crossroads of America, now at the crossroads of the immigration debate. Reporting in Indianapolis, Ashton Hackman, 13 News.
The Indiana Department of Correction tells us the prison already has 600 inmates on an ICE hold. We've asked how this partnership is going to impact capacity at the prison. So far, we have not heard back. We'll let you know when we do. In the meantime, Indiana's Lieutenant Governor is weighing in on immigration at a town hall in Vigo County. Beckwith claimed undocumented immigrants don't deserve due process. And that sparked backlash from immigration advocates who say the Constitution disagrees. Our Alex Almanza talked with an immigration attorney who says Beckwith's remarks don't just raise eyebrows, they raise legal red flags.
On Monday, Lieutenant Governor Micah Beckwith hosting another one of his signature town halls, this time in Vigo County, where comments about the rights of undocumented immigrants came under fire.
They don't have a right to see a judge.
Right.
They came here illegally.
Those comments made by Beckwith echo a larger sentiment from lawmakers on Capitol Hill: expedited removal and minimal judicial oversight for undocumented immigrants. It's a rhetoric that Rachel Van Tile with Exodus Refugee Immigration says is unconstitutional.
You know, the 1951 Refugee Convention and the 1967 Protection of Refugees, they both require us to provide people with an opportunity to present their case.
While undocumented immigrants don't have a right to stay in the U.S., the Constitution does guarantee them due process. meaning they're entitled to a hearing, the chance to present evidence, and the right to hire a lawyer, even if one isn't provided for them.
I'm going to tell you what I believe, why I believe it, and if you don't like the answer, I heard you. I just maybe don't agree with you, and so and that's okay. We live in a country where it's okay to have civil disagreements.
Beckwith's remarks also drawing attention for a historical comparison.
I kind of wanted you to kind of listen to how Beckwith compares this to some historical events.
When the Japanese were bombing Pearl Harbor, did we give them due process to actually see a judge?
No, we put them in concentration camps.
They invaded our country.
I hear the counter to that, and she's absolutely right. No, we didn't provide the Japanese due process. We put people in internment camps, and we rounded them up, and it is a stain on American history that we did that.
Now Van Tuyl says she's calling on Beckwith to retract his statements and for the governor to condemn the rhetoric.
These people are trying to do it the right way. They're showing up to their court hearings. They're showing up to their interviews, and you're arresting them there. You're not going after the people that are truly criminals.
And we have an update now on a legal back and forth we have been following for more than a year. This week, a federal appeals court ruled Indiana's 25-foot law is unconstitutionally vague. The law, passed in 2023, has faced several lawsuits over the last couple of years, claiming First Amendment violations. Among them, a lawsuit from several central Indiana media outlets, including WTHR and our parent company, TEGNA. The buffer zone law essentially establishes a 25-foot zone around officers performing their official duties. It gives them authority to order anybody nearby to back up, and it could lead to misdemeanor charges, fines, and potential jail time for bystanders who disobey. The law has been on hold, though, since last September after a federal judge ruled the law was too vague to be enforced fairly. Well, now a federal appeals court has upheld that decision. We'll continue to follow it. And still ahead, Emily, you spoke with Congressman Andre Carson. A lot of topics.
A lot of topics, that's right. We spoke about everything from the war in Gaza to the Epstein files. Take a listen.
We're calling for them to release. Some Republicans are moving over to our side. That's because the American people want transparency.
Our conversation next on Crossroads Politics.
Welcome back. As Washington came to Indiana this week, we're trying to get the perspective of lawmakers representing us in the nation's capital. So, Emily, who'd you talk to?
Well, I talked to Representative Andre Carson. The House is in August recess right now, and we spoke about a variety of topics, including the plan to house ICE detainees at Camp Atterbury. Carson has been trying to learn more about this topic since it was announced.
We're still waiting. The House is out of session, so obviously we're having to apply more pressure because the committee chairs and ranking members of jurisdiction are all traveling right now. So we're coordinating with committee staff as well as the administration.
Carson has been pushing on this subject, pushing to learn more information on it since it was first announced earlier this year.
Well, the crackdown in general, the ICE crackdown in general, seems to be a growing topic, not only here but across the country. We're just talking about the Speedway Slammer, the state prison up in Miami County being used to house illegal immigrants. So what does Congressman Carson have to say about that?
So at the time we talked to him, the Speedway Slammer had not come out, to be fair, so we didn't get a chance to ask him about that. But he said he is concerned about how this announcement about Camp Atterbury and this crackdown is affecting immigrant communities.
But what we've been told is that folks are being arrested for minor infractions as much as a traffic ticket.
And what does that lead to? Then are they checking their status and then taking them away? Or?
From what we've been told, they've been detained as a result, particularly those who are here illegally. And that's a separate issue, but our concern is that these people are being treated with the dignity and respect they deserve as human beings.
And Carson has long been an advocate of the so-called pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants.
And just for some context, Camp Atterbury, another facility that will apparently be used as well, in addition to the state prison up in Peru.
Correct.
So another issue that Congressman Carson has long spoken out on would be the war between Israel and Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu said he plans to occupy the entire Gaza Strip. We learned about that this week, despite protests from around the world.
Yeah, I mean, Carson is calling what's happening over in Gaza a humanitarian crisis and one he thinks requires action from American leaders.
community is demanding an answer from Congress. The global community is demanding action. We can no longer approach the starvation of millions and hundreds of thousands of men, women, and children as a global family and overlook this thing like it doesn't exist. It's unacceptable, and I'm glad to see people from all walks of life take a stand.
And we know Carson is on the House Select Intelligence Committee and has introduced resolutions calling for aid to Gaza and ceasefire between the two sides.
So he's back here in Indianapolis now because the House is in recess. That came a little early, though.
Yeah,
right?
it did. House Speaker Mike Johnson called an early recess, and some said it was to avoid a vote on the Epstein files, an issue that Carson says there is bipartisan consensus on to release those files.
We're calling for them to release. Some Republicans are moving over to our side. That's because the American people want transparency in a time of hidden agendas and hidden motives, and rhetoric is at an all-time high. People want the truth. And if there's nothing to hide, then release the files.
And we know there have been subpoenas to get more information, including one subpoena for one of the key figures in the Epstein files case, Ghislaine Maxwell. So.
And the president campaigned on releasing the Epstein files, right, and has promised answers.
Yeah, he sure did. And Carson, from his perspective, he says the president is playing games with the issue to avoid dealing with it.
Well, I mean, the president is a masterful marketeer. He loves trolling. He loves dangling things out there for us to catch on to and be held in suspense. But I think, you know, the government should not be treated like a television show. Wait until next episode to find out. We want answers now, and we deserve them.
And I think it's fair to expect that lawmakers will bring this subject up again, this issue back up again when the House is back in session.
I think that's pretty clear. What else is he working on?
So, you know, it's not an issue in the headlines often, but air safety. Carson is on the Transportation Committee, and he has been advocating, a longtime advocate, for secondary cockpit barriers to better protect pilots. And he says he thinks that there is growing support for it.
And this is an issue that is of concern. It will require some measures by the airlines to install these cockpits, even on new planes that have been ordered, but most people seem to be on board in the industry.
And Carson, he has authored legislation on this issue that was signed into law in 2018.
Well, air travel certainly has been something folks have been concerned about, certainly top of mind this summer with the number of incidents.
Yeah, and Congressman Carson acknowledged that concern among people and said it is something that needs to be addressed. Take a listen.
We know that because of the furloughs and the flight attendant, I mean, the air traffic controllers who are stretched thinly, high rates of depression, high rates of attrition, high job stress. We need to look at ways in which we can bolster the workforce while incorporating technological advancements to make our skies safer.
And again, one thing, though, that he keeps talking about is those secondary cockpit barriers. He did author legislation on it. It was signed into law in 2018. He calls it a seminal piece of legislation that he's long championed. Now, the deadline to make that happen was actually this month in 2025, but the FAA recently granted a one-year delay for installing those secondary cockpit barriers on commercial aircraft. So Congressman Carson continues to push for it and continues to monitor to see that that's going to happen.
Okay, well, we'll be keeping a close eye on it. And as always, all of our congressional representatives and both of our U.S. senators representing Indiana are always welcome to come on the show. We'd love to hear what they're doing and what they're thinking. Thanks, Emily. For Emily Longnecker and all of us here at 13 News, I'm Dustin Grove. That does it for this week's episode of Crossroads Politics. Thanks so much for watching. We hope to see you next time.